we are coming together in an office environment for a good portion of our days where we're taking our energy, our potential, and we're investing it into this company. And I think it's just a huge miss for companies to not acknowledge that they're affecting their employees' like mental and physical well-being.
Welcome to the Multiverse, where we believe that mushrooms can actually save the world. Each week, we'll be meeting with thought leaders and experts to extract the best insights and stories across everything from functional fungi, psychedelic medicine, and so much more. Thanks for listening. Step into the multiverse with us. All right. Hi, guys. Welcome back to another episode of Into the Multiverse. I'm really excited about this conversation. Shane Heath, who's sitting on my couch right now, is a friend of mine, most known for being the founder of Mud Wtr, but amongst other things, which I want to share a little bit about the other things that I know about you that maybe aren't as publicly known. You're an incredible artist, which a lot of people, if you've seen Mud Wtr, you've seen the ads, you may have seen some of your art incorporated into that. But one of the reasons why I'm the most excited for this conversation is you're an incredible advocate in the mental health space. You're really passionate about psychedelics, something we share a passion for. This podcast, most of what we talk about is psychedelics, and you're doing some really cool things in the world. You also have like a really special energy, and I think that the more that I've gotten to spend time with you, I actually I can see further into like the culture of what you're building, and it's really special. So I'm really excited about this conversation and to dive in with you.
Amazing.
Is there anything I missed in that intro that you wanted to add?
That was awesome. Yeah, I mean, Mud Wtr is a big part of my life, obviously. Takes up a huge portion of my time, and I think publicly it shows in that way, but there's a lot more there. And, recently became a father, and that's a huge other aspect of my life that I'm, growing into and learning a lot from. And art is kind of weaves my way into everything. And so that's kind of where it all started and kind of how I approach fatherhood, but also Mud Wtr, and how I'm starting to look into approaching mental health and mental health advocacy as well.
So I want to start by reading this quote that's on your website.
Let's go.
I was doing some stalking of you on the internet, and you had this quote, and I think it's really beautiful, and I want to hear your thoughts on it, why you chose it. I actually don't know the author of the quote, so maybe you can remind me, or maybe you wrote it, but nature loves courage. You make the commitment, and nature will respond to that commitment by removing impossible obstacles. Dream the impossible dream, and the world will not grind you under. It will lift you up. This is the trick. This is what all the teachers and philosophers who really counted, who really touched the alchemical gold, this is what they understood. This is the shamanic dance in the waterfall. This is how magic is done, by hurling yourself into the abyss and discovering it's a feather bed. Why did you choose this quote?
I mean, it's beautiful, right? On so many levels. There's a lot of trust that's in that quote, and I think trust is something that's always a part of every journey, but specifically a creative journey, where you're like traveling into the unknown, and you're trying to express yourself in the most authentic way, which means absent of fear of what other people might think. Like, you're just trying to be a true conduit. And there's a lot of fear that's on, the former side of that precipice before you jump in. And I think what you often find is when you do jump in, there is like that feather bed that kind of catches you. And to me, it speaks to like, when you are expressing yourself in a way that feels in harmony with, that energy that sits below your intellect, below what you're seeing and feeling. It's like the things that's making your heart beat, the thing that's making the plant grow. Like, when you're expressing yourself in harmony with that, the universe kind of catches you. And I think you often find that you're just like embraced. And what I've found is there's a sense of encouragement. And so, with like my team, I'm always like surfacing up quotes that I find get me to that place. And the hope is like it inspires their creativity and their courageous creativity.
Why is your Instagram handle so many possibilities? Because I read this quote and I was like, oh, for some reason, those two things feel in parallel. Those feel like they make sense.
Yeah.
But it's funny also, like, my brief side note on this is like we live in a world where people know each other by their Instagram handles.
Yeah.
We have a friend, Aaron Alexander. His Instagram handle is Align Podcast, so we call him Align Podcast.
The Align guy,
yeah. And so it's a funny thing, like how you brand yourself online is, it's
sticky.
It's sticky,
yeah,
for sure. Why'd you choose this?
So, I mean, the story is kind of interesting, and maybe I'll go there in a second, but I've always been a very curious person by nature. Ever since I was very young, I was, always the stereotypical kid that was always asking why, but to like a very extreme level. And I never liked instructions, like I loved Legos, but I don't think I ever built the actual thing that I was supposed to build when I bought the like Lego set. Like I didn't build the spaceship or the fire truck. I just liked finding things out on my own. And growing up, that was it was a blessing and a curse. Like it was challenging in many ways because I never felt grounded in any one truth either. Like I was always challenging both sides in any debate and anything that was going on in the world. And in like my teenage years, it felt a little disorienting in many ways. And as I got older and started to sort of like accept that as just the truth of who I am and exploring where those strengths lie, I started to become very open to it. Be open to that being a strength. And right around that time, I met someone who started a company maybe 20 years prior that no longer existed called SMP. I don't know if you remember this company. It was big in the surf world when I was like in junior high and high school, and it was like the cool hip brand. And nobody knew what it stood for. And, growing up, you're always like, it's like sex, money, power, or like smoke more pot. Like, you're like, what is it? And I ended up meeting the founder of that company right after I went to Burning Man with his girlfriend. And we just got to talking, and I was like, what was it? Like, I really need to know. And he's like, we didn't know either. Like, it was very fluid. And one of like the earliest forms was so many possibilities. And we didn't really like talk about it much, but when he said that, I was just like, oh, that's like how I approach. That explains that feeling that I felt since I was a very little kid, as far as just like approach that I have to life and to like interactions and solving problems. I've always been, just a very curious mind. And if you meet anybody on our team, like if you're working in a startup, there's so many times where you're at a fork in the road and you're trying to decide like which is the best path. And regardless of the path that's being presented, I'm always the one that's like, but what about this other path? Like I might agree with the person, but I just love exploring all other paths, because I feel like when you do so and come back to a chosen one, you're going in with eyes wide open. And I think it just strengthens your choice in the end. So yeah, it's just like an approach to life for me.
I have several comments, and I'm going to try to like choose the appropriate one because I don't want to derail us too far. But when I read this quote, I thought of like Tim Ferriss's fear setting exercise, where it's like, if you go down the path of the basic concept of the exercise is like, what's the worst that could happen? And then when you play that out, you end up like removing the fear from taking the leap, because what you find out is like, not only is the worst possible option
survivable,
like super survivable, not that bad, but actually could be like additive to whatever experience. Like it ends up potentially even being a positive. So there's that. And I was having a conversation with someone who came on the podcast yesterday that was kind of triggered by another, like I'm talking about Tim Ferriss a lot. I love his content, and and I'm assuming you've listened to some of his podcasts before. He's recently released this podcast about ketamine. It was like a 3-hour podcast, and the ketamine part was fascinating in and of itself, but what was really cool is that the guy, John Crystal, outlines depression and the mind and mental health in a really interesting way that as some of the things you were saying kind of like they reminded me of how he was explaining scarcity mindset, positive thinking, depression, anxiety, all of these things were like the actual, high level definition of depression mostly comes from like lack of hope, which comes from like not believing that there are other possibilities, like not believing that there are an unlimited way, or abundance mindset kind of like comes through that. And so I'd love to like take that with that context and like talk about your own journey with your mind and how it's developed to get to this place. It sounds like, it sounds like you came out of the womb like asking why and, being a really curious person.
Yeah.
But I'd love to hear more about your personal journey with mental health. And,
Cool.
You can kind of trickle in like how you started MudWtr, but like kind of answer your story through the lens of like how your mind has developed over time.
Yeah. And I think just to close that out, like another part of that quote, to me, it's about challenging assumptions. I'm a big fan of what's called like first principles thinking.
Can you explain?
Yeah. So first principles thinking is, it's popularized more recently by like Elon Musk. He brings this up a lot, but it's basically looking at these commonly held assumptions and challenging whether or not they're true. Just by the nature of our minds, we're always looking for patterns, and patterns are really useful because it allows us to operate the world in a safe way, but also in like an efficient way. You're like, oh, the tree's there, the plant's there. Like I'm gonna navigate through this path in a safe way, or these sounds might be dangerous, etc. And in the business world, there might be assumptions like electric cars are really expensive, or the batteries are really expensive, or space travel is really expensive, and it's very common for people to just believe that the way that things are, the ways that things always have been, are the way that they always will be. And what he does is like break things down to first principles, like what actually makes space travel expensive, or what makes a rocket non-renewable, and what are the actual materials that go into it. And you'll find there's just a lot of these commonly shared assumptions that are just sort of bunched together, and that becomes this truth, quote unquote. But when you break it down, the truth actually lies much deeper, and you actually can make a reusable rocket that's efficient, and etc. So that can be translated to your own personal journey too, right? Where you might assume that because I've always felt X or a certain way, I'm going to always feel that way. And whenever you're having a depressive episode or feeling anxiety, a lot of times your lens of the present, but also the past, gets completely distorted. And when you look out to the future, you're like, it always has been this way, and it's always going to feel this way. Like your focus becomes super narrow. And yeah, there's a lot more possibilities than I think you might think, especially in those scenarios. So yeah, my journey, where to begin? Let's see. Always very curious kid. Growing up, my best friend growing up, his mom was an artist. And she recalls, we would always go over to their house after school. He lived right next to our elementary school. And so we'd go play in the park, skateboard, all these things. And she remembers me specifically like walking by her art studio and kind of stopping and watching her and seeing what was going on. All the other kids were like running around playing. And she was like, like there's something here. And from a very early age, I was always drawn to kind of other ways of being in life. And when I have this like, what do you want to be when you grow up? When I was like 7 years old or something like that. And it says, I want to be an artist. Like I always knew I wanted to be in the creative world. And when I got into high school, my mom was a computer science major, so I got pretty into computers at a young age, and I started doing graphic design. And I started like a art t-shirt company where I'd like do these custom t-shirts, and I was very entrepreneurial as well. Started like a car wash business called Shane Shines. Yeah, check it out. When I was like 14.
Wait, what? Yeah. How long did this run for?
Not long. It was just, like neighborhood detailing. But like I was just
How much revenue did Shane Shines
run
rate, you think?
Really good retention, because I think the
more than
the
MudWtr?
AOV was pretty low. Like I don't think I was charging a lot. And around
AOV was pretty low.
Yeah. At around 14 years old, I grew up in Santa Cruz, by the way. So surf town, and we were exposed to like marijuana at a pretty young age. We started, experimenting with weed around like 12, 13 years old. We weren't getting stoned, I don't think. And for me, I actually liked like building things to smoke out of more than actually smoking at that time. Like getting creative with like apples and whatnot.
bowls,
Yeah.
Those are classic.
And we were smoking and like thought we were cool or whatever, but like didn't really know what was up. And when I was around 14, 420 came around and we got excited and I got excited and built like this 14-foot tall bong out of 2-liter soda bottles. And each bottle had sort of like a different, they were like chambers, right? So I had like ice in one and like fruit roll-ups in one and, different things to like flavor the smoke as it went up. Like we were like that.
That's advanced.
It was pretty advanced.
Wow.
And I had to get up on the roof to smoke it. And, we were like, I was such a little kid, like so immature, like had no context for what was going on. I was just like, this is cool, whatever. Anyways, take this bong hit, which probably took like 3 minutes to clear. And then I got high for the first time. And I remember walking downstairs and my friend's older sister came home and like freaked out, was yelling at us. And I was just like, oh my God. And I remember having this like it was an out of body, like way too high blast off experience for me. Like I saw her walk in the house twice. Like it was like, again, in my mind, I was like, oh my God.
Like
I ran, glitch in the matrix. I ran in the bathroom, like splashed water on my face. I was like, what is going on? Like completely out of it. We get kicked out of the house. And me and my friends are like walking down to the beach and I'm trying to be like, I don't have any language to describe like what I'm feeling or like what's going on. I'm just like, yeah, like this is cool. I'm like losing my shit. And it rocked my world. Like I got way too high and I felt all guilty. Like the next day I was like, I feel weird and I couldn't tell my parents. I felt like, oh my, like I don't know what's going on. Like, did I just fry my brain? Like all that dare stuff was coming back. And it like really, I think at the time it was like a true psychedelic experience. But I didn't have any integration skills or any way to communicate like what was going in my mind from that point. But it kind of like cracked my awareness open into the possibilities that can be experienced through consciousness. At the time, I was just like, I think I'm going crazy. And I sort of avoided any sort of like psychedelics, especially weed, for a really long time. And honestly, I like went through a period of depression right after that because I felt disassociated from my friends a little bit. Like I was like, I don't know if I'm okay. And I don't really know even how to describe that. And it was just a really, it was a really hard time for like a solid 2 years, and sort of was like able to distract myself coming into like senior year of high school. You're like partying, whatever. It was like kind of suppressing a lot of that came up, and got into college. And around junior year of college, I had a roommate who committed suicide. And that, like at that point, like sort of all of those, everything from that earlier period in my life sort of came back. Were just existential questions. Why are we here? What the fuck is going on? Like, is everybody just distracted? Or like, there's a lot of questions to be asked, but like nobody's really asking them. Like we're just kind of distracting ourselves, playing beer pong, surfing, going to school, whatever. But like, really, why are we here? Like, what? Like, are you feeling this? This is intense. And I was at the point where I was just like, cool, I'm going to stop ignoring and suppressing that and start like inviting that in a little bit. So this is senior year of high school. I didn't know like, how do you do that? I stopped avoiding it. And from that point, there were little things that started to find their way into my life. I started to do yoga. Like 5-6 days a week. I had a friend who was studying Ayurveda. I had no idea what that was. And she convinced me to do an Ayurvedic cleanse. And at the time, I was still living with all of my roommates. So like still living in like a party house in Mission Beach, San Diego. And it was pretty funny because like you'd open the fridge and there'd be like pizza and Keystone Light. And then there's like Shane's section. And there was all these like tinctures and barks and like herbs. And like I thought I was gonna get disowned from my friends, but my friends were just like, yeah, that's my friend Shane. And I was like, cool. Like you can actually walk to the beat of your own drum and it's like accepted. And so I just took that momentum and kept like exploring what I was called to. In senior year, I went to my first music festival and took psilocybin mushrooms for the first time. And it was day one of the festival, took mushrooms, have never been to anything like that, like walk in, you know, tens of thousands of people. And I was just like, whoa, like hadn't had a psychedelic experience like pretty much since I was like 14 basically, right? Mm. And it was super intense. Luckily I found a cool zone called the Do Lab and was able to kind of chill out, gain my bearings. And that night was just like completely transformative. Like once I got kind of my sea legs and calmed down, I like ditched my friends and just had like this solo exploration night, dancing, like really feeling the world. And at one point I was standing in front of a live painter. You know, there was like crazy music playing, music I've never heard before, and this painter painting this huge mural live in front of like hundreds of people dancing. And I had this deep calling, like, this is like you, this is you too. Like you, this is where you belong here. And this type of expression is, you know, this is what you're meant to do. And after that music festival, I went home and bought my first canvas and started painting a ton. And the next year.
And did you not paint it, just for context? Like, have you painted a little bit before?
So yeah, I mean, I'd taken like art classes, you know, like a couple painting classes throughout college, but it was like you have a canvas and like I never had bought a canvas and like painted at home or outside of the classroom. Mm-hmm. It was just, I loved drawing and painting classes, but I was never like doing my own thing. Like I was like school, outside of school, I'm doing what everyone else is doing. But now at this point in my life, I'm like, fuck that. Like I'm going to figure out what I'm doing. Like what's my calling. And yeah, like the next year, very serendipitously, I was painting at Lightning in a Bottle live next to that artist, which is pretty wild. And yeah, that was kind of this journey into exploring like what my creative outlets were. And right around this time, I was working up in Silicon Valley for a variety of tech companies. And, you know, indirectly, this is when MudWtr kind of started, because at this time I was pursuing a fine art career and I was working as a designer at, you know, some tech startups and, you know, living really healthy lifestyle, but drinking tons of caffeine. At the time, I just thought caffeine was going to allow me to do more, do it faster. I thought it was just a performance enhancer. I didn't have any knowledge about sleep. It was just kind of something I had to do at night. And, but outside of that, I viewed myself as someone that was healthy. You know, like I was doing yoga, I was meditating, I was eating healthy. But I was like, why do I feel so stressed and anxious? And I'm not sleeping. And I felt like the little things happening at work were just causing way too much stress than they should. And I started to look at caffeine as potentially something that was detrimental in high doses to what I wanted to do in life. Didn't make it easy to quit. And in fact, it wasn't until I did an art residency in India, lived in India for 6 months. And it was the first time I was just sort of like ripped out of the cultural prescriptions. Was able to like unlearn to relearning new patterns, relearning new habits, and sort of rethinking like what was right, wrong, cool, uncool, and came home very empowered. You know, it was just like another stage in that, like finding who I was and really being able to walk my own walk. And that's when I started, you know, exploring different functional mushrooms, exploring them as a morning ritual that was more than just a vessel for caffeine. And I just started to feel amazing. And I had the most productive years of my life when I got home from that trip from India and started to drink, you know, this combination of ingredients. And really started to explore more deeply into mindfulness, meditation, breath work, and plant medicine as well. I feel like I'm talking a lot. If you have any questions.
No, I'm so in it. It's so cool to hear your story, like end to end, like my brief introduction is like, I've heard pieces of it.
Yeah.
Because, like, you and I are friends, we'll go to dinners, like we were at dinner last night, but it's always in passing. And I think a lot of people that know of you know the Mud Wtr version of your story, but not necessarily like how your mind has like progressed through. So this is like really, it's
it wasn't
really
like
cool
a
to hear.
whiteboard business, really. Like it happened very organically.
Yeah.
But yeah, so basically what happened was I moved down to LA. I was painting a lot, and I was working for a tech startup and bringing this combination of ingredients with me in the office. I was at like what I was drinking was basically masala chai, cacao, turmeric, cinnamon. Then I had lion's mane, reishi, and cordyceps. And then I'd put chaga conchs in it too, into like a large mason jar. And I just like bring it with me to the office, and people are like, what the fuck is that? This is back in 2014, 15, and beyond. And, I started calling it mud because it just looked like literal mud. And I thought, given my like mental health struggles, and that I've always been sort of that person that like, oh, there's Shane's side of the fridge kind of thing, that this was just one of my weird things, right? And like, I can't drink caffeine. I was kind of dealt a bad hand of cards, whatever. But when people would ask, I'd kind of talk about that. And I was very surprised when pretty much everyone that I would meet was like, yeah, I kind of feel that too. Like I'm feeling like I'm trying to wean off coffee a little bit, or trying to quit altogether. And I was like, what? Like everyone drinks this, but like there's kind of this weird relationship to it. Like nobody was trying to drink more coffee. Like they weren't like trying to get more caffeine in their system. Like everyone was like, yeah, I'm trying to like figure out how to kind of like tone it back a little bit. I'm like, well, maybe I could help there. And at the time I'd started 2 companies prior, I'm kind of like fast forwarding some things, but like had built a skill set around starting businesses, had built skill set around building websites, design, branding, all of those things. And so I was like, maybe I can just take this thing that I'm making and just put up a website and start sharing it with others. And up until that point, most companies that I had worked for or started on my own required like a developer. I was working on like a mobile app and all of these things. And this was the first time in my life where I was like, I can just do this on my own, like literally like in a commercial kitchen in my house. Like, and that's basically what I did. I coded a website, like designed, the brand, the packaging, and I didn't have any real like savings at the time. So I like had like a credit card. It was like a $4,000 limit. And I just literally started ordering ingredients, the same ingredients I was ordering for myself off of Amazon. And orders started to come in, and I would, mix them up in a Cuisinart mixer and package them up and ship them out to customers. And, it's very startup scrappy, but super conscious as well, because I knew what it was going to take for me to be able to like quit my job and do it full time, which meant that I needed to raise capital. And to raise capital, I needed to, get to information events. I needed to figure out like, why were people drinking this? Is there potential for product market fit? Like, am I creating an up and to the right growth chart? Am I showing that I am committed? And I was just like all in, and it felt like an art project. In the early days, it was, I was writing all the copy, I was designing the packaging, I was changing it here and there. And it was like, I didn't have to get permission from anyone. There was no, meetings to be had. I would just feel an idea and do it, hit print, and it'd be like shipping to customers like within 5 days. You know what I mean?
Yeah, there's an immediacy behind it. So cool.
It was so fun. It felt like a painting because, working in an office environment, coming home and working on art, there was always like this release for me. It was like a retreat because there was no rules. I could make the rules. I didn't have to ask for permission, and it was super fun. And in this context, it was very similar. I was building a brand that I wanted to see in the world, like aesthetically and the voice, the tone. And I was obviously making a product that I loved to drink, right? And sharing it with others. So that was you know, the creation of the brand, the product, and then the subsequent years, there's a lot more that's happened.
There's so much more that's happened. Like, I know that it's impossible.
So that was May of 2018, you know, just for context.
Okay. So, you know, a little, you know, over 4 years ago now, so much has happened from then until how, like now, you know, people know MudWtr, people know the brand. If you're in the wellness space, you know MudWtr, which is also probably like a crazy experience to go through, like from, you know, people recognizing something that you were just at one point shipping to like individual people, and just to see the growth of that. One of the things I think that is the coolest about MudWtr is the culture. And so a lot of what you guys have been recognized for, I didn't share this at the beginning, but it was Inc., right? Inc. magazine recognized you guys as one of the
best places to work, and
best places to work, and like what, 2 years ago or last year maybe.
Last year. And
you know, if you go and you read this article, it's on Inc. magazine's website. There's a few things that were pointed out about the way that you guys run the business. And it's, you know, you guys comp functional medicine doctor visits for your employees. You encourage microdosing at the workplace, which is something I want to talk about. You just have this really amazing list of wellness benefits. I think you guys have like a book stipend. There's all these really unique, I'm just naming like a few things here. And maybe you can elaborate on a few of them, but would love you just to kind of list like, you know, maybe like 5 to 7 of them. Why you chose them. And then also like, there's so much we can talk about within the company culture element, but I would love to like, maybe just focus on like, why do you think people like working for MudWtr? Hi guys, taking a brief second away from the show to tell you a little bit about our sponsor, Supermush. Supermush is actually a brand that I co-founded. You may have heard us talking about Supermush and or functional mushrooms throughout the show, but long story short, functional mushrooms completely changed my life. I started using them as a part of my daily routine about 6 years ago. Everything about my vitality, my skin, my hair, my energy levels were on a completely new playing field that I had never experienced before. And we started Supermush to help other people get their daily dose of mushrooms back into their world, but in a way that was really easy and on the go and accessible and tasted good, because a lot of times mushrooms don't taste great. Supermush is actually the most effective way for you to get functional mushrooms into your system because they're in the format of functional mushroom mouth sprays. We make 3 mouth sprays for energy, immunity, and chill. A lot of people don't know this, but mouth sprays actually have the fastest absorption rates. You will feel their effects almost immediately. I use all 3 of them every single day: energy in the morning, immunity in the afternoon, and chill every single night before I go to bed. If you would like to try Supermush, you can use code ITM15 at checkout. That's ITM15. This will give you 15% off your next order at supermush.com. We also make a whole line of really cool mushroom festival forward streetwear. And if you want to stay in the know for everything that we're up to as far as events, new product launches, you can join our text program by texting MUSH, MUSH, to 38048.
Cool. So yeah, I mean, back to when I was starting the company, it was, I wanted to build a brand that I wanted to see in the world. And I didn't really want to compromise there. I was like, if I have to like cut corners here because people think like market research this or that. Like I remember my mom early on was like, I don't know if you should like support psychedelics, you know, like donate to psychedelics. Cause I was doing that since day one. Like even the first month I made like $1,000. I was like, I'll donate $100 to MAPS, you know? And she's like, I don't know if you should put that on the label. Like people might not understand. I'm like, Mom, just trust. Like if I can't do that, I'm not going to start this. You know, it's like, I wanted to do it the way I wanted to do it from the beginning. And then with the product, of course, very similar. Like I wanted to put out the product that I was drinking. And then with the company, I was just like, I want to build a company that I want to work for. And I'd worked for multiple companies in the past. One of the more foundational experiences that I had when it comes to building company culture was right out of college. I, you know, graduated, studied design and art, and I wanted to figure out where I wanted to work. And my favorite brand in the surf industry, I'm not going to mention the name, my friend was a surfer for them. He's like, you should come visit. I'll give you the tour. I'm like, no way. Oh my God. I was so excited. And like this brand stood out to me because they had like a different approach to how they communicated and a very distinct, differentiated brand. He took me to the office and it was just like in an office park, you know, fluorescent lights, cubicles when I walked in, and I was like gutted. I was like, why? Like
you envisioned like ping pong tables,
it was like
and
inside
like yoga.
out, like the same thing. I just thought like the brand was going to be reflected from the inside out. And I never understood why it wasn't, and I don't know if the brand is around anymore. But it's not that hard to reflect it from the inside out. And I think in the long term, it's very beneficial. And I view like investing in company culture and investing in the people on the team and their mental and physical health as in a very similar way that I do with just my own nutrition, where, you know, you hear people say like eating organic or eating healthy is like really, really expensive. It's too expensive. It's expensive in the short term, but in the long run, like when you factor in everything from, you know, mental to physical health problems, chronic health problems that you're going to go through if you're eating McDonald's instead of something good, but also like the what is the cost of just not performing at your best and not reaching your potential. And the same thing is with the investments we're making with our company, where when you first join our company, we get everybody an Oura ring, and then we connect them with a functional medicine doctor to do blood work, cortisol tests, and make recommendations. Both of those things are optional, but most people do take us up on it. And yeah, we have, as they're you know, gaining traction in our company, we offer book stipends. If anybody wants to do like a retreat, typically like a psychedelic retreat or like a wellness retreat, meditation, silent retreat, something like that, where you're like not just going to like Cabo and partying. It's like you're going to go within. Like we support that, and we have a stipend, and, you know, it's all about like removing friction around those things that maybe you've always been curious about doing, like felt called to, but you're like, I'm just going to do this other thing anyway, or like instead, because it's what we've always been doing. We're like, maybe go do that. We'll help you out. Every quarter we have a habit bonus. So right now it's random acts of kindness. And the way it works is 66 days out of the 90 days. 66 days is just like, there's some science papers on that's how long it takes to make a habit. 66 days out of the 90 days, you do this habit, and you'll get like a $500 bonus for doing it. And we do meditation, cold exposure, and gratitude journaling.
Wow, you pay people for ice plunging. That's amazing.
Yeah, but some people don't do it. It's just like, but it's cool because a lot of people, you know, they try it out, and we just want to like encourage people's curiosity, you know, back to so many possibilities. It's just like, maybe try it once, and maybe it'll resonate. Maybe it'll resonate years from now. But one thing I always thought about was like, we are coming together in an office environment for a good portion of our days, where we're taking our energy, our potential, and we're investing it into this company. And I think it's just a huge miss for companies to not acknowledge that they're affecting their employees' like mental and physical well-being. You know, like companies pay people, so they're like the financial part's covered, but it's stressful, right? Like when you're working for a company, it's causing physical or mental stress and sometimes physical stress. And you're also sitting, you know, or hopefully standing, but you're like inside working on something. And so forever, companies have been contributing to someone's mental and physical well-being. It's just that they're not doing it consciously. And so we're trying to do it in a way where, you know, if you work with us for a year, 5 years or 10 years, it's like you grew from it. You became a better person from it, which is like, it seems obvious, like it should be that way. But I think right now it's like a lot of people work somewhere for 10, 20 years and they're like, I wasted my life, I'm dead, right? And it's just so unfortunate. So
it's really unique. And you had this article that also came out around, it was like Fast Company or another, was that right?
I think it was
Fast Company?
yeah.
About microdosing.
Yeah.
And so that's actually what got me like looking into your work culture. And I've been following some of the things around it for a while, but like, you know, as I was preparing for this podcast, I learned that you guys do things like gratitude circles at the end of every week. And like all of it feels really unique. And I would like to pivot the conversation to talking more on the psychedelic side of things, both personally and like how that translates into the company culture. And also like as a reflection, after seeing, you know, Mud Wtr is one of the fastest, to my knowledge, like one of the fastest growing brands in the United States. Like it's massive. And you kind of coming out of the psychedelic closet, even though you've been out of the psychedelic closet, it's not like you just had a moment recently where you shared this, but sharing the normalization of microdosing for human optimization or psychedelics for therapeutic use with your team gives other people permission to do the same. And obviously, like we have this, we had a conversation about it earlier today, but we have a nonprofit called the Microdosing Collective where we're trying to actually help legalize microdosing. And part of that initiative is we want founders of incredible companies, both in CPG and tech and psychedelics, to come and support this initiative so that they're supporting something and talking about it with their teams in the workplace. And so you have this quote, I think it was on your Instagram that I pulled, but specifically as it relates to microdosing, and I'd love to hear if you have any thoughts on it. And then I want to dive a little bit into some of your personal experiences with psychedelics. But you said, personally, I respect and I'm grateful for law and order. With that said, it doesn't mean that it shouldn't continue to evolve and adapt to research and the needs of people it serves. If laws weren't allowed to be questioned, all sorts of irrational things would be illegal. Women would not be allowed to vote, same sex as being able to marry, and freedoms of millions of people, to name a few. And then you have a reference to, it's literally illegal for bingo games to last over 5 hours in North Carolina, which is really funny. Laws are great, but we are living in a mental health epidemic with the last pharmaceutical breakthrough in the space being Prozac. And then, you go on to, share that meanwhile, like lots of people are still being locked away because of psychedelic plant possession. And then I guess the last part of this is, people are unable to access or use compounds that have studied the history of efficacious medicinal use. So I thought this was really cool. Why did you decide to share this with your team? And why did you decide to make a statement specifically as it comes to this?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say first off, I think businesses have a lot of potential to shift the direction that the world is going in. I think that's a really obvious statement though, especially when you look at the way that businesses have shifted the direction of the world in a negative way, from, the environment, specifically. It's very obvious the power of capitalism, the power of businesses, and it can be used in a negative or positive way. When you look at a company like Patagonia, for example, they make apparel, they make clothing, but their mission is to save to save the planet, right? And it's to protect our outer landscapes. But they do so through what they're making, and they're building both cultural awareness, but also, a tribe around that cause. And when they first started, there wasn't a lot of awareness around, nobody really cared where their shirt came from, or organic cotton or any of that. And a lot of that was because of supply and demand. There just wasn't the supply of it. And the supply chain wasn't built because there wasn't a demand for it. But Patagonia is we're going to build the supply first because we think the demand will be there. And irregardless of whether it's there or not, it should be there because our world should be going in that direction. So they're creating the world that they want to exist. And for us, I see it very similar, where we're trying to save the mind. And, we're protecting our inner landscapes. And, I don't think anything should be off limits in doing so, especially when you look at the issues around the world from our outer to our inner. And I think it all starts with the inner. And we're in a mental health epidemic. It's not getting better and it's getting worse. And we still have potentially healing, life-saving compounds that are Schedule I drugs. And, up until more recently, extremely taboo to even consider or talk about, right? Luckily, that's starting to change, and it's starting to change, not for me, but a lot of people starting to talk about it. And starting to talk about both the science, but also just starting to build safety around discussing it with, your parents and, older generations that, went through the drug war on drugs that we're still fighting out of. And so when it came to our company, and, figuring out what cause, what cause we wanted to support, for me, it was pretty obvious that, starting with the root cause of the mind and these compounds that really go to that place, made a lot of sense. where a lot of we're in a culture where we like to go after the symptoms, and we just want to try to feel good all the time, and we'll take things in order just to feel good instead of trying to get good at feeling things and really like seeing what's underneath that, which is probably where the problem begins. And you'd be able to either handle the symptoms or, navigate through them if you solve that root cause. And so that's what really excited me about psychedelics. It's what excites me about, all the things around it, from meditation to breath work, which I think have a lot of, synergies with that space. And yeah, Fast Company reached out to discuss our stance on these things. And I think in the article they said we encouraged use of psychedelics, but it's more like I said like we don't encourage the use of psychedelics, but if somebody wants to take them, we don't discourage them. And in fact, we'll like surface up information that can be useful and then using psychedelics in a safe way. If there's something wrong with that, that's concerning to me. And I think that, expecting any person who's not a police officer to like police other people's bodies and minds, freedom over their consciousness, is just pretty ridiculous, especially when there's substances that are, psychoactive substances that are commonly consumed, like caffeine being one of them, alcohol being another. And so, yeah, it's like, it's not like the first time office environments have provided, psychoactive substances to their employees at like we're not even going that far. So yeah, it's a pretty interesting thing. And it's pretty interesting how like, piercing that was. We're like, oh my God. And it's like, we're literally just, yeah, you have freedom over what you put in your body. Like it kind of makes sense.
Yeah, it kind of makes sense. But I think that what you guys are doing, and like, again, I'm taking this into like how we're looking at our own company. And like, obviously we're in a bit of a niche space because like, I have a mushroom company, and I openly talk about my use of psychedelics and how they've been really profound for my life. I talk about that with my team. But it's been really beautiful to see that normalization process where all of a sudden like the fear of this aren't things you're supposed to talk about at work, like work and life all of a sudden feel very separate. And that's not to say that there shouldn't be separation between work and play, but the fluidity between these conversations and normalizing them at work, I feel makes them not bad anymore. Where like if something is off limits to talk about at work, then automatically it's something that like your subconscious is like, I shouldn't be doing. And my whole team microdoses. It's been profound for them. And those conversations are so cool because like hearing about their stories and learning about how it's impacted their creativity and their mental health, it's like it's bonding also in a way. Totally. And so like from the cultural perspective, it's just, I'm excited that you guys are putting out more content around that. And I know a lot of it has been fueled by your own personal experiences. And so anything you want to share, like most impactful psychedelic experiences, also just like how they make their way into your current world, like how to use microdosing, macrodosing. Yeah.
So I'd say the most impactful psychedelic experience I've ever had was my first ayahuasca experience. And that was in 2016. I did a 3-day retreat in Santa Cruz, and I went into it, with a lot of awareness around potentially what could happen, listened to a lot of Aubrey Marcus's stories, and had a couple friends who'd done some journeys specifically with this group. And, I was pretty nervous about it. And the first on Friday, we kind of drank a dose. It was sort of a lighter dose. And I was just kind of like tension, holding on, like trying to control the experience. But got through that night. And the next day I was just really ready to let go. And, given the experiences I had when I was like 14, and I was just kind of like, I was always afraid of really letting go to a true psychedelic experience, because I was like, what if I lose my mind? What if I feel like I did then? And for some reason, the sacred nature of the ritual that they build like really builds this container that allows you to feel safe, or allowed me to feel safe, and drank a large dose. And I feel like it was like the first time in my life that I can remember, probably since I feel like children are constantly in this state, but it was the first time in my life that I can remember where I was just completely free and like I let go of everything. Like I was just like there, completely present. And what I mean by that is like there's kind of this one side is like you're like clenching, you're like holding on, you're definitely not letting go. And then there's the other side, you're like, let go, let go, let go, let go. Like you're trying to let go. But like truly letting go is neither of those, right? It's like in the middle. Like you're not trying to let go anymore. You're not trying to hold on. You're just there. And, you know, there's a lot that happened that night. There's a lot of just like very personal, intimate things and very abstract things that I try to keep to myself. But a lot of it was like this inner journey of exploring like this world that is just like deep inside of me, like my soul, spirit, like being, like literally interacting with this thing, this being that is channeling through me. And from that day on, it was like that experience was profound. The night was, you know, the most beautiful, magical night of my life. But I think the subsequent years were like way more powerful in terms of change. And a lot of that has to do with like I built this like a relationship with myself where I can like feel like back to like that getting good at feeling thing. Like I can like feel myself more. Like I can feel that connection, that conduit, and like intuition, I guess. And that has led me to be a lot more intentional with where I spend my time and how I open up new experiences. And one example is when I started MudWtr and, you know, got through those initial stages of like make it in the kitchen, like I know I need to eventually fundraise, and got to that point where people wanted to put money in. And some of those people were, you know, bigger VCs, but some were friends and family. Like my sister invested. There was some friends who definitely are not investors, like don't have that kind of money, who really wanted to invest. And it made me, you know, it was a really exciting time, but it was such like I felt such a responsibility for people's capital and like hard earned money and resources that I didn't feel like I could rely on myself to do what I needed to do to bring this company in the world. I needed to rely on something bigger than myself. And in order to call that in, I ended up doing a 3-month microdosing program with ayahuasca, actually. Where I cleaned out my diet. It was very much like a dieta, where I was eating a very clean diet and, you know, no alcohol, no drugs. And I had like a 1-hour morning ritual every morning that would start with like a little spoonful of the medicine. And there was like meditation involved, visualization involved, and a lot of journaling involved. But it was all like this creating space to set this deep, deep intention for this journey that I was embarking on, and really grounding myself in the sacredness around this, like the resources that was allowing me to do it and where those resources were coming from. And it's something that like I'll never, like I think about all the time, right? Like when things are hard or when opportunities arise, like it's my compass. And I think that if we apply, like you don't have to do psychedelics, you definitely don't have to do a 90-day ayahuasca microdosing, but there's so much benefit to bringing like ritual into our day and into, you know, our interactions and into the things that we're starting, the things that we're excited about, that I think allow us to, you know, set proper intentions. And I think it leads to, you know, amazing follow through with that.
That's a really cool part of your story that I did not know. And I also am really curious about the ayahuasca microdosing.
Yeah, we can
Is that something that you heard of? From, like, how did you?
So yeah, the group that I did that first ceremony with, they let me know that that was an option, and they facilitated it too remotely. And so there was, they, you know, shipped me the medicine, and there was guidance on like the protocol for it.
I think that's gonna spark some interesting questions from people that are listening to that.
Yeah.
And is it always something, just like a logistical question on that, is it always something they recommend doing after a larger, like, you know, like a...
This was a year and a half, couple years later.
Okay,
so,
but it's more like you do the ceremony first and then you could do this after, or is it something you could maybe do just
not necessarily
isolated?
Yeah, I think
cool.
for some folks who like were interested in ayahuasca, like, but didn't want to do a ceremony,
yeah,
they were doing that too. And
that's
it's basically like a dieta, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is cleaning out your diet, really viewing plants as spirits, and in, you know, cleaning out what you're putting in your body, you're making room for a specific plant to speak. And in this case, it was that plant.
Yeah, you're clearing out the noise.
Ayahuasca vine. Yeah.
There's so many more things that I want to talk to you about, and we'll have to do another one of these.
Yeah. Part 2 coming soon.
Yeah, no, it's really cool to hear your story. And I think people that are listening to this, you know, a lot of people that listen to the podcast, they're really interested in psychedelics, but also just the stories around a lot of these really profound people that are building really cool things in the world. And like, this did not happen overnight, and there's obviously so much that's gone in, you know, through your system. Obviously lots of MudWtr, lots of different plants that have created the current version of your consciousness. And what I'd like to end with is just sharing, you know, Shane and I were at a dinner last night, and we were all going around the table. It was like a dinner focused on mental health, and you know, you shared that a large part of your mission in the world is to address the root cause and the mind, and you worded it so beautifully. You kind of like wrapped it up in a lot of the stories you shared here, but how did you summarize that? Do you want to summarize that for people?
Yeah, and kind of the prompt was like, why are you passionate about the mental health space? And I started with just like, of course, like I've had my own mental health journey, and still, you know, struggle with things, and have found amazing ways to you know, heal and find balance, which I'm passionate about sharing. But I'd say I'm passionate about sharing that because I feel like the mind is where it begins, and I'm really interested in looking for root causes. And the reason is because you can look at all the problems in the world, or look at all the problems in your life, and get very overwhelmed and start to wonder, how do I solve all of those things? They feel very disconnected. Like there's like the environment, the mental health situation, there's politics, there's war, there's starvation, there's people don't have water. Like there's so many things. Like, how do you solve all of that? And I think where I find hope and relief is that when you often solve root problems, there's this cascade effect. There's a lead domino effect, a systemic effect, where like if our minds are in a good place, as a society, as a human race, a cascade of positive outcomes will surely follow, from how we treat each other to how we treat ourselves, to the businesses we're inspired to start. You know, it changes sort of everything, and over time can change the trajectory of the world. And I believe that, you know, all of those things start to fall into place, because in here is in a good place. So yeah.
Beautifully said. Okay, so the last few things we always like to end with. First of all, anything you want to share about like exciting things that are coming up for you, MudWtr, over the next 6 months? What can people expect? What should we pay attention to?
We got some product drops coming up in January, which I'm going to keep on the DL. But I will say that one of the more exciting things is we're going to launch a cafe space that will be in Santa Monica, near Santa Monica and Ocean Park.
I've been to the bones of it. I haven't seen you know, the most recent build up, but it's an amazing space.
Cafe/experiential space. You can come in and try any of our products. We'll have current products, but also like some future products. But then it's going to be a space to come and hang out. We'll have music events. We'll have experiences. We'll have film premieres. We'll have live podcasts. All of these things. So super excited about that. Hoping that will open January-ish. Yeah. I
think I told you this, or maybe it was Dursu from your team, but next time we do a bike ride through Venice, I want to have it end or stop or start or wherever at the MudWtr space.
That'd be perfect. Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah. Okay. Last question we always end with is, because this is a podcast about psychedelics, what is the most important lesson that you would say
whether it's ayahuasca or psilocybin, but just psychedelics in general.
Yeah.
What is the most important lesson they've taught you?
I think it's that the truth, like where you want to go, often lies within you. And I think if you can remove the noise, there's a lot of wisdom that can be felt inside. And, you know, something that I share a lot with people is around that is like sometimes the best thing you can do to solve a problem is to do absolutely nothing. And it's something that I learned from psychedelics, which is to make room for the answers to come from within. Because I feel like we spend a lot of time like out there searching, working for it, blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. But sometimes being in silence is where the answer will arrive. And it feels counterintuitive, but I found it to be very true.
Someone that I was just speaking to the other day said something very similar around, he's been on a few month grind to try to solve, you know, a problem. Obviously, like markets are crazy right now. People are freaking out. And he's just like, I did the opposite. I chilled. I was in silence. Exactly that. And he's like, and all the downloads and the answers came to me, and also the outside world responded, in a really beautiful way. So I love that. Yeah. Okay, so now that we know where people can find you, we can just repeat it. Where, you know, you're on Instagram at So Many Possibilities. Any other, you know, where can people find you? MudWtr, everything like that.
Yeah, drink MudWtr. It's our MudWtr Instagram. MudWtr.com is our site. We also have a platform called Trends with Benefits, trendswithbenefits.com. And we have our own podcast as well. Maybe we should get you on the podcast too. We talk about some similar things, but also more broadly mental, physical well-being as well. So yeah, check us out and say what's up.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. We'll have to do more.
Thank you.
I'm excited to follow your journey and support in any way.
Awesome.
Amazing.
Likewise.
Thanks for diving into the multiverse with us. If you're interested in being a future guest on the show, sponsorship, partnership, or you're just mushroom curious, we're always looking to expand our mycelium network. Be sure to follow us on Instagram at Into the Multiverse, where you can find clips from this podcast, psychedelic legalization news, events that we're doing, and so much more. In addition, we've also created the world's first ever mushroom-specific marketplace called The Multiverse, which you can find on Instagram at Multiverse or online at yourmultiverse.com. We've also created our own in-house consumer lifestyle brand called Supermush. We make mushroom mouth sprays. We make a whole line of mushroom streetwear. You can find it on Instagram at Supermush or online at supermush.com. We'll see you next week. Much love.